Thank you and welcome to Yesa Rising. This is Crystal Red Bear and Jason Crazy Bear. And today we are talking with Faith Spotted Eagle. We are on this red road to DC totem pole journey and we are stopping at different sacred sites along the way. And one of the places that I want you guys to hear is from Faith Spotted Eagle. She lives in on the Missouri River in the Yankton Sioux Reservation, and she comes from the Lakota, Nakota, Dakota peoples, which is of Siouan ancestry, which our tribes out here, especially here in Chatham, Virginia, are of Siouan ancestry. The Okanichi, the Monacan, the Sara, the Eno, and a whole host of other tribes, also the Tudelo and the Saponi. They are also of Siouan ancestry, and so we share a common relative. So Faith is the founding grandmother of the Braveheart Society, supervised by a group of community grandmothers called the Unchi Circle. And Unchi means grandmother, which is dedicated to restoring endangered and lost cultural practices to heal the wounds endured by the Lakota, Nakota, and Dakota peoples. This process of restoration is decidedly community driven. And she often always says, we can't wait for someone to do right by us, so we have to do it ourselves. I think our prophecies with our native people have indicated that there will be a time when we absolutely have to stand up, and this is that time. And this is from Faith Spotted Eagle, and we are on the Red Road to DC totem pole journey. And I would love for you to hear what is happening with Faith in her area. So, from free prior informed consent, sacred places, what sacred places means to her, and what is happening. So let's listen to Faith Spotted Eagle.
Good day, relatives. Very wonderful to see all of you. I come sending my voice from the Ihanktua Mokoche, the Yankton Sioux, as the white people say, since they can't pronounce our words, along the Missouri River, and Mani Wakpa. And I greet you with a good heart and a virtual handshake. So what is happening in my part of Turtle Island? The threat continues just as it has for before I was born, is against the land, the water, the animals, and the children. Starting with the children first, we continue to have threats against reproductive justice along the waterways of the Ocheti Shakoin. The Seven Council Fires, for example, in one of our communities, there are high levels of uranium in the hair follicles of children and adults. That's a continuing threat to reproductive justice. The land, of course, we had a great victory here a few days ago with the termination of the KXL pipeline, which my family fought against for 13 years, my tribe, my treaty committee, our women's society, our men's society, and many, many thousands of people. But that purpose was to prevent these tar sands from polluting our lands and our waters. And there are, at this point, there's favoritism and privilege given to farmers who continue to pollute our waterways, which eventually affects our riparian ways and further in the land. So we continue to face these threats, and ultimately it will affect the animals. During the KXL fight, they had endangered species that were thrown aside, and one in particular is such a lesson. The animals are so far advanced than we are. They have evolved for thousands of years, millions of years, and one of them was the burying beetle, and that was to be tossed aside, and they were saying that it would recover, it would be okay, not to worry about it. The interesting thing that has evolved with the burying beetle, our relative in the insect world, is that they navigate by star knowledge. Can you imagine navigating by the stars? What an ultimate, advanced, brilliant way for an animal nation to negotiate their way. And that's just a small example of the high degree of intelligence that our relatives have. And that's why we model our culture after the animals. For us, the keystone species that we model ourselves after is the buffalo nation, Te Oyate. It's a matrilineal society where it honors the grandmother cows who actually will lead the herd when they move. And when they make decisions, they continue to teach. When they lose a relative, they mourn that departure of that relative. They'll try to lift them up, something that we've forgotten about. But we model ourselves after them because they have that high degree of intelligence beyond what we have forgotten about. And so those are the threats with the land, the water. I live on the Missouri River, and we were in the UN, the UNDRIP declaration. It says that people are not to be forcibly removed from our lands or territories. At the age of a year and a half, I saw my community of white swan die from environmental racism. Every single one of the 6 dams on the Missouri River main stem was put right smack in the middle of a Native community. And so our community was killed. Some people left, became homeless, never came back. We lost a lot of people. We lost rich riverland, and that land was taken from us and it was given to the government. It was illegally taken. It's something that we will continue to pursue for the rest of my life and beyond. And so we never were given just compensation for that. A small amount was given that does not even touch anywhere near what we lost in not only an economic way, but in a spiritual grounding way where our families were very strong because they were self-sufficient. And so that's what we're facing here. We also are the northern grasslands. Before the immigrants came, all of this area was native grasslands. It was beautiful. There was an ecosystem in place that was built on a ancient wisdom of how each of the plants were in communication with each other. Some of the things that we've lost on the Missouri River are the presence of beavers who regulated the health of the water and the river. The cottonwoods, the old growth cottonwoods, are disappearing because the rivers have been channeled. Mouse beans, those were beans that were very important to our culture. Red willow, the list goes on and on. But because the channel of the river pretty much stripped the vegetation, there's parts where the river is lifeless. And so what we're doing here is we're fighting to recreate a cultural bioregion on a 150-mile stretch of the Missouri River. And so we're fighting hard, and that's what's happening here. We've been at this for 4 years. We have a 10-year plan to begin with. We're into our 4th year. We're pretty excited about the dream team of spiritual leaders, scientists, youth, elders, advisors that we built. And we're mapping everything that we can in this 150-mile stretch, because to us, mapping is sovereignty. Knowing what you have in every piece of your land and water is important for management, indigenous management purposes, and that's what we're aiming for. And we've come a long ways. We're excited. This summer, we're going to be pretty busy doing surveys on the water, on the land, and even in the air. We're asserting our right to have those sovereign rights to keep our air from being polluted. So I could go on, but I think that I learned the importance of this was emphasized by my experience at our dear relatives in Standing Rock. When the large camp came together, I realized that because of captivity, many of our tribes have not been able to fully inventory what they knew before. So this is old, new knowledge that is coming to the surface, and it's our responsibility to make sure that happens. And us elders have a responsibility to be good to listen to and pass this on to the young ones. So that's where we're up at here on the Northern Plains. There's 100 things on my list to do, and I hope to get through it by the time I'm 100 years old.
Faith, that's so important. We are in our own fight here in Virginia and North Carolina, and it's talking about the Mountain Valley Pipeline, Southgate, the Mountain Valley Pipeline that's coming through. And, we're experiencing all of these degradations. I just learned of another pipeline that's coming through Charles City, Virginia. It's the Chickahominy Pipeline. There's all of these environmental degradations. So, yes, we are fighting these same degradations here on this side of the United States or Turtle Island. And it's real important that we get back to understanding what's happening in our own communities. We were assimilated way before the rest of the Turtle Island. And so, my hope is to help cultural people heal. And what you're talking about is so important, and I think it needs to be heard here in the community. So, what do you think, Faith?
Creator, all that is sacred, our animal relatives, once again, you have given us a beautiful red day. And for that, I am thankful to be able to have this time with you to talk about sacred sites protection and what it means to all of us. Everyone has a viewpoint of that, a worldview, but I think the basic thing about sacred sites protection is that a lot of it is based on place-based knowledge, because when we were placed at certain parts of Mother Earth, that was our center. I'm mindful of what Black Elk said to Neihart, the white author who recorded his life. He said he felt like Black Elk was being arrogant. And he said, so you say that you are the center of the universe. And he was kind of chiding him. And he said, why do you think you're the center of the universe? And his answer was so very wise. He told Neihart, he said, wherever you stand on Mother Earth is the center of the universe, because the earth is a ball. It is a circle. It's a sacred circle. So what that brings to mind, and my point in saying that, is that wherever tribal groups, indigenous groups grew up, they were given the teachings and the wisdom of the land that surrounded them from the time they were born until they reached the last ceremony of their life, when they departed from this world into the great Milky Way, into the star nations. And so during those generations of generations, we learned from the teachings of the animals, all the four-legged and the insects, the winged ones. We have names for them that are codified in our language that actually detail what their behavior and their duty was to teach us. And so I think that the knowledge that we had is so brilliant and has been not only passed down in oral history, but DNA. I think that we retain that indigenous knowledge. When you think about it, it's only been about 200 years since some of us have been colonized. And make no mistake, unfortunately, there's a degree of colonization in each and every one of us. And so it's our personal duty to identify how we have been colonized and not to become an active colonizer. And part of that decolonizing is to know that we are only a small part of the earth, the water, the land, and the air, and that we have a duty to figure out, what is my role? When I was 12 years old, I was sitting on the banks of the Missouri River, and I saw my father looking wistfully across the water at where our old community used to be. And he looked at me and he said, my girl, when you grow up, you're going to have to figure out what to do about this river so we can get it back. And I looked at him and I said, I'm only 12 years old. And he said, you'll figure it out. So I figured it out. Even after my father is gone, he still guides me. But my duty, as many, many women who took care of the water, was to talk to her, get guidance from her, pray to her, and be mindful. There are times when the river, we can't expect the river to help us. We have to help the river. We had a water ceremony when we were kicking off our water talks for our bioregion, cultural bioregion work. And one of the grandchildren, a granddaughter in the kinship system, after the ceremony, we had everybody take the sacred chashasha down to the water and talk to the river and explain to her what we were going to do with our work and get her consent, her free, prior, and informed consent. And so when the granddaughter came back, she was crying. And I asked her, I said, my girl, what's wrong? And she said, the river told me that she couldn't help me anymore, that she needed my help. And I think that clearly indicates that there's spirit communication from the entities that surround us. Everything has a spirit. And when we open ourselves up to caring, responsibility, commitment, relationship, and cooperation, we get those messages loud and clear. And so that sacred site protection starts with even before the child is born, they bring a gift into the world. And as they grow, they get direction from not only their parents, their grandparents, and their surroundings. And pretty soon, we have a ceremony in our tribe called the Beloved Child Ceremony, which is around 7 years old, when the child starts to grow into an older child. And we reinforce that ceremony to tell that child, we indeed appreciate the gift that you brought to this world. And this is the divine teachings that we have, that this child will figure out their role and the responsibility, because without these protection of these sacred sites, we will no longer be connected to those original instructions. Those original instructions will be far away. We won't even be able to understand the, the songs of the birds. I read somewhere that they had birds separated when they were young, and they were not able to hear the songs of the other birds, and they couldn't sing them, they couldn't replicate them. And that's why the birds no longer talk to us, because we don't listen, and above all, we don't understand. So it's important to take these young ones outside and these sacred places, because there are messages that they will get that we don't even hear. So they not only provide a learning lab, they provide a spiritual connection, they provide a memory that is ingrained in our DNA, and they give us direction for the future, because there are still places where we have dwellings of spirits, and they will oftentimes reveal them to ourselves. I'm mindful of a time along the Missouri River, and this is really important for protection, because the non-native world will not understand this. But we were surveying along the Missouri River, and all of a sudden we had this feeling, and we call it takushkashka, something sacred moving. So the team, we all looked at each other and we knew something was there, but we couldn't see it. And so we're spending time looking around, and all of a sudden, one of them said, let's go stand up on the hill. So we elevated ourselves on the hillside, and we looked down, and we saw that the grass had been smashed down in a circle, almost like a crop circle. And then we all saw it, and we said, look at the circle, something is here. So we went down there. In the very middle of that circle, there was a tunkan, a rock, and it had a face on it. And indeed, it was a dwelling of a spirit. And when we turned around, we could smell soup, we could smell cooking, we could smell cheaka, which is the tea that was always essential to wellness. And sure as anything, we knew that a spirit still dwelt there, and that's what we entered on our survey. It was a dwelling of a spirit. And so we are the ones that need to monitor those sites along the Missouri River, not people from universities, not students who really don't know what they're looking for and will miss things, or worse yet, make up things about what they see. So I am always encouraging young people. We need lots and lots of people to return to the responsibility of watching over these sacred places, because that one day we're going to need you. And when we call on you, you have to be ready to stand up for that site. I could say much more, but that's what I don't know how long I have to speak. So if you want me to say more, I can, all day long, all night long.
Faith, women are nurturers, but they are also mother bears, ready to defend the land and water. That was a quote that you said, and I truly believe that. As we journey on this red road to DC, I would also like to mention that our partners are CCLA, the Native Organizers Alliance, the Natural History Museum, and Illuminative. And so we are going to these different sacred sites. So can you tell me your thoughts about what is happening for all across Turtle Island? What are your thoughts, and how can you affect, and what can you tell our listeners today? Thank you.
Ampetuashte relatives, Upiakid Chantokia etaha Napetius papi, Nichastopi. From the very deepest part of my heart, I extend my hand. I give you gasto, means I pat your cheek, which is an affectionate way of greeting relatives on this beautiful red day. I've been asked to make comments about free, prior, and informed consent, and I will make this brief. because I think it speaks for itself. Free means that when we came to this earth, when we were born, we came with inherent abilities to be able to speak, to hear, to live, to have a way of being that we knew things. I think that in the Western world, they call that intuition. In our native world, we call it Nagik Sapa or spirit smart. So we come with the knowledge of being spirit smart, where we are free and we can listen to our surroundings with the place-based knowledge and recognize that we have a responsibility as free, having free agency to make decisions that are helpful for our people. When we're faced with that, we are handicapped, which is hindering our freeness, is that the world around us with the federal agencies, the colonization of the US government has created a hierarchy, which means that there's always something above. There's the colonizers, there's the gatekeepers, and there's the victims. Oftentimes we're down here. So what we need to do is we need to work hard to switch that. My daughter always talks about switching that hierarchy to a circle. And so free means that we have every right to be part of that circle and not to be power over us. To me, that means free. And prior is obviously, we live in a world of English language, which are dominance words. The word consultation, where many decisions are made and they almost artificially will ask us to come to the table after the decision has already been made, which is what consultation means. All they're doing is consulting with us. They've already made the decision. And so what we need to seek is consent, pre-decisional consent before all of the discussion occurs. And that hasn't been done. The other thing I think with prior informed consent is that what we're doing with the bioregion, rather than waiting for development to occur, we need to inventory and survey every bit of Turtle Island that is still ours, spirit-wise. And so that informed consent will be in our lap, that we tell them before they even touch that area that you cannot go there. Oftentimes with informed consent, it comes after the fact. And so I know that I can't remember what the definition is in the UNDRIP, but it's ultimately the right to maintain, protect, and develop the past, present, and our future. And that's what informed decision-making is, because we know our places, we know our oral history, we know what our spirit tells us. And above all, we've been here thousands and thousands of years before these folks came to this land, who were immigrants that didn't have a home, were essentially homeless. So we're still their grandparents, and they still need to listen to us. And that's where Indigenous management comes in hard and strong. Thank you.
Thanks, Faith, so much. So, do you have any final words or things that you want to say to our listeners today? And I really thank you so much for doing this for Native Organizers Alliance and myself. Thank you so much. Okay, Faith.
I guess an important thing to consider is that there are unborn children that at this moment are making their choices of their parents. And we have to keep those unborn children who are spirits that are coming to this earth, that are fully looking forward to a life that is good. And that life has to be protected by us. And so it doesn't have to be serious, sad, or scary. It could be joyful. It could be filled with excitement about relearning what we need to do about these sacred places. And they're waiting for us. Sure as anything, they're waiting for us to come home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faith Spotted Eagle, for joining us today. This was very informative, and I really hope our listeners learned a lot, learned some history about their culture, what's happening, how we need to protect the land, how things are sacred, how things have spirits, and how Creator and God, how they all work together, and He puts life in everything that we do, people, places, land, water, air, animals, everything that you could think of. God created this and He put a spirit into. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, listeners, for listening to Yesa Rising, our People's Rising radio show on WKBY 1080 Inspirational Radio. And you can catch us every Monday at 1 p.m.